Doug Ford has been wasting no time as Ontario's new premier. He's making decisive decisions about the most important subjects: carbon tax, cap and trade, Hydro One. But I think he's tackled the most controversial subject of all, and he did so quickly and decisively, namely scrapping the child sex curriculum that hypersexualized children of tender years. He just scrapped it and reverted to the last version of the sex ed while he engages in a review. No fuss, no muss, he just did it. And joining us now in studio to talk about this is the woman perhaps most responsible for this bold policy decision. I'm talking about Tanya Granic Allen. She's with Parents as First Educators, the president. It's a pleasure to have you back in the studio.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Ezra.
I have to say, this was a tough one because the media and the establishment is so unanimous that this is the test. Are you a modern political person or not? And Doug Ford just sort of said, boom, we're done it. No fuss, no muss, no wishy-washy, no flip-floppery. And it's done. It's done already.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
This was a great issue because you actually did not require to pass legislation. It's a simple directive from the minister. It's done, and to have that full repeal, though, I should mention that there needs to be a directive sent to the teachers saying that no component of the WIN sex ed should be discussed further. For example, the unscientific gender identity theory, that should not be mentioned, and that should be made very clear. And also, I know that they're reverting to the previous version. There must always be an opt-out for parents, so advance notification and seeing through the repeal by always giving parents an opt-out. Because let's face it, you'll never satisfy every parent, and every parent must have their rights respected, and that must be paramount.
Those are excellent details that ought to be added, and I agree with you that they're important. But the center, that this, and you know what? And I think it gave people the creeps that Ben Levin, who was later convicted of trying to recruit young children to molest them, that such a person, a pedophile, would have been the deputy minister at the time this curriculum was developed. When he was convicted, I think a lot of people said, how can you possibly allow a curriculum? And I know he personally didn't write it, but he oversaw the ministry for a portion of that time.
Well, everything that came through his office, he signed off on. And so he was, in part, developing the curriculum. But of course, I'm with you, Ezra. It's a massive red flag. Who wants their children learning a sex ed curriculum from a convicted child pornographer? It's absurd.
Yeah, I mean, we followed that trial and that conviction very closely. I even hate to mention the details because they're so stomach-turning. He even chatted online with someone saying he would like to molest his own grandchildren. I know that's so shocking to say, and I'm sorry to say it and gross our people out, but when someone like that is in charge of the curriculum, how can you go with that into the schools? It's fruit from a poison tree. And it's shocking to me that it took an election to get that ripped out.
Well, it's true. And, you know, people say, well, are you for updating the curriculum? Sure, certainly I am. And I will agree with the former Premier Kathleen Wynne that, yeah, updates need to happen. And with modern technology, things like sexting and whatnot need to be covered. Strange, though, that while, yes, I'll concede that it needs to be updated, she never once mentioned pornography in the curriculum. You mentioned Ben Levin, again, convicted child pornographer. Yeah. Makes you wonder why.
Yeah, it's really strange. And we were just talking before we turned the cameras on. If there are some parents out there who really want to teach their children of tender years, I'm talking about 6-year-olds here, about the 6 genders or some of the more extreme stuff, I suppose they can do that. So this isn't stopping any parent who really loved the Ben Levin curriculum, God forbid. It's just freeing the other 95, 99% of parents from being bound by it. It just seems so common sense. Let me ask you though, what has been the public reaction? I know the usual suspects in the media elites are freaking out, but what's the reaction been? I mean, you're the president of a parents-oriented group. What's the reaction from severely normal Ontarians?
It's overwhelmingly positive. In fact, I mean, think back to when they introduced the curriculum. Did you see people protesting for classes on anal and oral sex or masturbation on Queen's Park? I didn't. I saw parents freezing their butts off in the middle of winter saying, by the thousands, saying, hey, no, this is irresponsible and sexualizes our kids. But since the leadership and since this issue was thrust into the leadership and now we have the repeal, hopefully fully by the end of the week, we see that parents are saying, hey, we know there's a problem with this curriculum. We hear a lot about the problems of this curriculum. We're not sure exactly what, but there's an issue. I need to open up the books of my kids and ask them, what are you learning in school?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of parents also had a lot of, they were alerted to the problems within this curriculum when kids would come home from school and they'd be discussing things around the dinner table that parents would never imagine they would have.
Yeah. Oh, you're so right. I mean, I read through the Ben Levin curriculum very carefully, and some of those subjects, in my view, and I don't think I'm a prude at all, if you're not a grown adult, if you're not, I mean, that's like college level maturity. And for young kids, that was my chief beef with this, is it pushed sexuality to to young kids who should be allowed to have a childhood where they're not being forced to think and talk and grapple with issues that you're supposed to have a childhood. That's what was so irksome to me. Not even what was being taught, but how early.
Absolutely.
Why are you talking to, I'm not going to say babies, but these are people who are playing with dolls and not anatomically correct dolls. Like, what are you doing?
Well, again, gender identity was introduced as a topic to 8-year-olds. Do you know how many genders there are? I think we're up to 112 now.
Yeah.
So that's concerning. Most adults are confused by, and let's be clear here. This is unscientific.
Yeah.
I'm probably part of the majority that believes children should be taught facts and scientific-based things in school, not theories that are unproven.
Well, and the left always says, "Oh, you're just a prude. This is science." You know, I challenge anyone who's watching this without Googling it to name the 6 official genders that the Ben Levin sex curriculum had. And thankfully, what we're talking about now, it is now history. Doug Ford, I'm impressed by the fact that he tackled this substantive issue. But I got to tell you, it gives me encouragement about him as a premier on 20 different issues, because now I know that when it comes to an issue that the media is unanimous about over here and the people are almost unanimous about over here, he won't bend to the peer pressure of the media. That's the rarest thing in a politician, isn't it?
Well, I have to just say one thing, though. When it came to my candidacy, that was not the case.
Yes.
So while I'm happy to see that he is keeping most of his promises, he did break his promise to me. And again, as to why, you'd have to ask him, because I have not heard from him.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. I didn't want to emphasize that because the news of the day is the child sex curriculum has been repealed. That's great news. You're right. That was a big beef for us here at the Rebel, because in so many ways you were the kingmaker. It was your campaign that put Doug Ford over the top for his leadership, and I found his firing of you as a candidate, or maybe I don't know how it actually went down, I found that demoralizing, and I thought, this reminds me of Patrick Brown. But I think now that he crossed the finish line, he's stronger. I don't want to ask you to reveal confidences, but are you at liberty to tell our viewers, have you been in touch with Doug Ford personally or his staff since you were displaced as a candidate?
So his choosing not to recognize me as the democratically nominated candidate in Mississauga Centre, that happened May 5th, and I reached out to Doug that day, and he did not return my call or text. Mm-hmm. I did hear from his campaign manager, Corey Tanaik, who gave me the information, and I have not heard from him since. So any particulars of that day, I suggest you invite Doug on and ask him yourself.
Well, I was more interested if you've had a rapprochement at all, or a reconciliation, or any more interaction. So basically, when you were sacked as a candidate, that was it, eh?
Well, my phone is always available, and I hope if he wants to reach out to me, I'm happy to take his call.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, and I have to say you're a good sport, and you're remarkably positive, given that you earned, and you were not handed that nomination. You had to fight for it and win it.
It was very stressful. I told Doug this when he called to congratulate me on winning the nomination. I said, Doug, I will do 10 leaderships before doing another one of those. That was stressful.
Yeah.
And but it was a wonderful experience. I met so many wonderful people from such a diverse community and faith backgrounds who really stood unified with me on this issue of repealing the sex ed and on religious liberty and freedom of speech. Well,
I hope that you can become a part of the government in some way, because I think you represent a group of Ontarians. I don't know what percentage it is. You have an expertise in the issue of representing parents. You obviously helped put them over the top. Your focus on this issue, I think, is you and there's a few others who properly get credit for this change. I hope that you are incorporated in the government in some way. But tell me what you do. You're back as president of Parents as First Educators.
Yes.
What is that? Is that a part-time? That's obviously a part-time NGO that you run.
Well, it represents over 80,000 supporters in Ontario, grandparents, aunts, uncles, parents. But I'm a mother of 4 young children.
Yeah.
I'm married happily, and
So you're pretty busy.
I'm a very busy woman.
Yeah.
But look, I got into the leadership for many issues, but to be an advocate for the grassroots, for free speech, for religious liberty, and for the repealing of the sex ed and whatnot. So I was always in this for the issues. So I never intended to run for politics. I only did so at the behest of Doug and his team. I followed through, and then things happened. But I will always be in there to advocate for the issues. And in my role as Parents as First Educators, as president, is to advocate for the parents and the children of Ontario.
Well, I got to tell you, you handled that unfair defenestration a lot friendlier than I would have done. You've been a lot more positive. I mean, I think what happened to you was atrocious, frankly, and I said so at the time. But you held your tongue and you were positive and you were focused on the prize, which was getting that curriculum thrown out. Mission accomplished. So credit to you for biting your tongue and being a team player in a way that many others wouldn't. I hope that you will have successes in the future. We will cover what you do. We'll cover your projects. We think you have an important voice. That's proved. You, in many ways, helped shape Ontario today, whether it's Doug Ford's own success or this curriculum. So I'd like to say on behalf of our viewers, we think that you are an important part of the public policy conversation. And whatever you do in the weeks and months ahead, keep us posted, because we think you're a positive force in this province.
Thank you, Ezra, and to all your supporters and viewers who have either personally sent positive messages, or I know who've quietly supported, the parental rights and just freedom in general.
Yeah. Well, I'm hopeful that a little bit of you has rubbed off on Doug. I mean, I think he's a good egg to begin with. I think he's got a good heart. He reminds me of his brother in a lot of ways, who had a big heart. I think he's going to be good for the province. I think you've got to stay on him a little bit, though. I think we all do, because let me put it this way, you got 1,000 journalists and other elites pulling him this way. Everyone who can should help pull him that way, so at least he can walk straight.
Well, and they're also, sex ed is one issue. I mean, we have to talk about Bill 89 at some point, where children are being removed from their homes if their parents don't subscribe to gender theory, and if their child wants to change sex, and they don't get them hormone therapy or surgery, the child will be removed, because that's considered abuse, as said so by the minister under Kathleen Wynne's government. So that has to be fixed.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that. I mean, I don't want to jump into that now. That's such a big topic. Let's have you back on another day to talk about that in depth. And then there's even the federal C-16 that Jordan Peterson first brought to light. There's so much to talk about. The battle never ends, because the other side never rests. But Tanya, it's great to see you again. Thanks for coming by our studio. Congratulations on the effect you've had. I have to say, you've had more impact on Ontario's trajectory, perhaps than anyone else other than Doug Ford himself. So congratulations.
Well, thank you, and thanks to the parents. This was a parents' effort, so it's a victory for parents.
Well, great to see you again. There you have it. I admit I'm a bit of a fanboy. I think Tanya has done some great work, and I just said so about 4 times, but it's the truth, don't you think? That's an excerpt from my daily TV show, The Ezra Levant Show. Normally it's behind a paywall, but I thought you'd like this video, so we put it on YouTube. If you want to subscribe to watch the daily show every day, including always 2 interviews a day, and I read my hate mail, just click on this screen and become a premium member.